Welcome to Just Go Grind, a show that focuses on helping you launch and grow a business and navigate the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Justin Gordon, and in this episode, we have Chris Bennett, who's the founder and CEO of Wonderschool, a company on a mission to ensure every child has access to early education that helps them realize their potential. This is also a company that's raised $20+ million from top investors like Andreessen Horowitz. In this episode, we go through how Wonderschool got started and what Chris did in the early days to get his first customers on board, the team behind Wonderschool, what goes into ensuring the quality of everyone in terms of the teachers at Wonderschool, how they looked at growth over time, their experience going through 500 startups, and so much more in this episode. As always, these show notes are at justgogrind.com/podcast. And you can support the show by leaving a rating and review over in Apple Podcasts. This episode is brought to you by Hawke Media, a full-service outsourced CMO based in Santa Monica, California, providing guidance, planning, and execution to grow brands of all sizes, industries, and business models. Hawke Media is recognized by Inc. as one of the fastest-growing marketing consultancies, and their collaborative process, a la carte offering, and month-to-month fee structure give clients the flexibility they need to boost digital revenues and marketing ROI. Hawke Media, the company, has serviced over 1,500 brands of all sizes, ranging from startups like Tomorrow Melon, SIO Beauty, and Bottle Keeper to household names like Red Bull, Verizon Wireless, and Alibaba. And also, I had the founder and CEO of Hawke Media, Eric Huberman, on the podcast in episode number 23, if you want to take a listen. And to get a free consultation, head on over to hawkemedia.com and be sure to mention Just Go Grind. Without further ado, here is Chris Bennett, co-founder and CEO of Wonderschool. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be on the show.
Yeah, happy to have you on here. And obviously with a lot of experience you have as an entrepreneur, most recently with Wonderschool, I'd love to have you give a little overview of what Wonderschool is for people who aren't familiar.
Sure. So Wonderschool is a network of childcare programs, in-home programs that are in parks. We're even starting to work with small micro centers, so commercial programs. And we've been around for 4 years and we're all over the country.
Yeah, you've grown a ton in the last number of years, and it's been interesting to kind of see some of that growth as I've been doing my research. And I'm always curious about how companies start. And so I want to start with that as well then. How did Wonderschool start in the first place, Chris?
So I'm originally from Miami, Florida. My parents are immigrants from Honduras. And growing up, there was a really big emphasis on education for both me and my sister. I went to an incredible in-home program for after-school care in elementary school throughout. And I also went to an incredible childcare program growing up. I'm also one of 31 first cousins. And so I was able to sort of see like how things turned out for me versus my cousins. And one of the things that was a big difference is, I went to these incredible in-home programs and childcare programs where my cousins sort of didn't go down that similar route. And turned out that I was the first in my family to graduate from college. So I graduated from Wharton in 2007. And, now I'm an entrepreneur in the Bay Area. And looking back, I was really trying to understand, what led to me having a different outcome than my cousins. And it turned out that, education played a big part in that. And so I started hearing from my friends in the Bay Area that they were having a hard time finding childcare. And I thought that was really strange because, growing up, I didn't think finding childcare was difficult. I always thought that was, and I don't have children, so I haven't actually gone through like the childcare search myself. It just sort of made me think like, what could I do to help get parents more access to childcare? And I also thought more about the woman who I went to for after school care. This woman named Yoli. She started her business in her home and she grew it to 100-child center in our community in Miami. And she's still running her business today. And there's all these, stories of like small business owners failing, how all these small businesses fail. But she was such a huge success, I didn't really understand why more people weren't doing what she did. So came up with this idea to create more childcare programs. And what we actually did is we hired a teacher, we rented a home, and we started a childcare program in Berkeley to learn everything about the process of creating a program and operating a program. And we scaled that to we have over 1,000 programs on our platform now, all throughout the country, serving thousands of families.
That's incredible. And in that early days as well, with that first teacher in this rented house, then what were some of those things that you were taking away from that helped you then as you grew this, expanding from that first to obviously many, many more at this point? What were some of those early lessons that you learned?
The experience of the teacher matters a lot, not necessarily the education, but the experience of the teacher. Another thing we learned was that parents really want something close by, with parents in their community, with someone they can trust. We learned, everything about licensing and the process for getting a program licensed, the background check process, how to ensure quality, how to ensure safety. But I think the biggest thing was that I'm someone who didn't have an background in education or early childhood education,
Yeah.
and we quickly got an enrollment at our school. It took us 6 months from like idea to our first enrollment, and it made me think, like, if I'm able to do this, there's a really big need here, and it's really worth pursuing.
And to that point, then it only took you 6 months to get enrollment, which is kind of remarkable. You think about it, for not having the experience with this as well. Then take me through your co-founder and who started this with you, because I'm really curious to hear what the makeup of was the team early on.
So I started with my co-founder Errol. He's no longer with the company. He left the company maybe about a year ago, a little over a year ago. But we started the company together. He was, having a hard time finding childcare himself, and he recently had his son Addie. We started a program in LA and a program in Berkeley so that we could learn everything about it. And he didn't have a background in education either. We were just your typical SaaS tech founders who started companies.
That's awesome. And so you don't have that experience necessarily, but you obviously are getting a ton of lessons and learnings from just having the first one, taking action and having this first school then. And then take me through how you're looking at growth then from this first to the second, the third, and really expanding out from there in the early days to obviously what you got to today, which is 1,000 on the platform. How did you look at growth from there?
We wanted to be really thoughtful about quality. And so that's something so we weren't actually trying to grow too fast early on. And we were taking it like one program at a time. And we also were primarily focused on programs that were starting out at the time. And then towards about a year or two into the business, we started to work with people who already had childcare programs. And now we sort of support both. So we support folks who are starting childcare programs and folks who already have programs. And yeah, the company's been growing pretty rapidly since we decided to focus on both types, maybe about 18 months ago.
And with that then as well, Chris, I mean, how are people typically finding out about Wonderschool? Because obviously is a program it's needed for all across the country in terms of childcare, but how are people finding out then about what you guys are doing?
I'd say a big way folks are finding out about us is via search engine optimization. So we're doing a lot of SEO. We have a pretty strong word of mouth component where folks, talk about Wonderschool. So teachers refer other teachers, parents refer other parents to Wonderschool. And so that's how, we're growing. We're getting a lot of referrals and a lot of word of mouth.
And on that note, obviously with getting word of mouth, having a good program is a big part of it. And you mentioned the quality side of it. What goes into making sure that these Wonderschools are all high quality? Because as you said, that's such a critical component of this. What goes into that quality, maybe quality assurance side of things with Wonderschool?
So early on, we actually interviewed every teacher, And there was like an application program process to join the platform. And then we changed that. Well, we interviewed everyone. We were actually visiting every program, going into every program's home, meeting with the teachers on a regular basis. That helped us build a lot of, proprietary quality systems with our product that we were able to build to get
Yeah.
visibility into the program. And then when we started to scale to other states, we tried a number of things where we hired people in the state to actually like visit the programs, like as contractors to test that out. We've done video calls with the programs. And now we're at a point where we're more of an open platform and we let, anyone join. And when someone joins, we do a background check to make sure that they pass a background check. We share their information about their program. If they're licensed, we share that on our site to let parents know whether the program is licensed or not. And when a program gets licensed, in most states, someone visits the home, someone does background checks on everyone who lives in the home, and then the state's constantly monitoring the programs to make sure that they are within code, and we rely heavily on that system that's already in place to ensure that the programs are in good shape, and then we get a lot of parent feedback now, and so we ask parents on a regular basis like what they think about the program, how things are going at the program, and it's all based off of a system we created called our quality safety vision, where we're able to have like an opinion on what quality should look like in the program and monitor that quality on an ongoing basis. And then we use that information for parents who are looking for childcare to get visibility on whether the program meets, the quality standards of Wonderschool so that they can make a decision about enrolling in the program.
And you mentioned the states, expanding different states. Were there certain ones you were targeting on purpose in the early days of like, okay, we want to go state by state, this one to this one to this one? How did you look at that perspective of, kind of geography in terms of which regions or which areas you wanted to get into with Wonderschool?
Early on, we wanted to focus on places that we were sort of like looking for the most dense areas in the US. So we did New York, LA, San Francisco.
Yep.
But now we're in rural areas. We're everywhere. We're in suburbs. We're urban. We're all over the country, and that approach is going well.
And one thing is too. So even going back to, I love it still the earlier days, but progressing this business took a little bit of funding, obviously over $20 million over the course of time. Your first round of funding, I know you had been at another company before, so you definitely had experience, but take me through like the early funding for Wonderschool. How did that go for you? Because a lot of other founders who, have ideas and are building things now are curious about fundraising and how that process goes for you. And like the first round of funding, how did that go for you in Wonderschool?
It went pretty well. We raised from first round capital. Josh Koppelman, who I was working with at Solzy, led the round, and so that process went really well, and we were fortunate to raise a round pretty quickly. Through that, Cross Culture Ventures invested as well. Marlon Nichols invested, and 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 so I'm not the best person to talk about fundraising because it's like I've been fortunate to be in the system, be in the ecosystem for long enough that like I know a lot of investors and I know the sort of process for fundraising. The what I always tell folks is like my first company centrally, first company in the Valley centrally, that was a slog. That was in 2011. I didn't know how to pitch. I didn't have much traction. I didn't really know how to build a product. And yeah, looking back on that is even now as we're having this conversation, it's pretty mind blowing. How much has changed personally for me is like understanding how to build a company, but yet it's still so hard. I'm learning every day. But yeah, that first round was really hard. I remember someone agreed to a $50,000 investment, and I was like so excited. And then he asked more questions. He asked more questions, and he decided to come in at $5,000. And that
Oh,
was
wow.
it was a big bummer, but I took it because it was you sort of had to put your ego aside and get your first check in, and then I used that momentum to raise our first seed round.
Well, and going back to that, I'd love to hear more about that story because, like you said, I mean, I think it's unique to have, people on who have been through investing in terms of having so many high quality top investors. I mean, you had your Series A led by Andreessen Horowitz. You mentioned first round. I mean, this took obviously multiple companies you've gone through. I think it's helpful to understand that you didn't start with these companies, like you said, you were struggling in the early days. So in that company in 2011, you got the first 5,000. How did you leverage that to then get more investors, especially when you maybe didn't have the network at that point in time for your company?
So I got the 5,000, and then the next thing we did is we applied to 500 startups, and we were in the third batch of 500 startups. Um, Great batch, super super incredible, set of founders. Christine and Dave were so helpful in helping me, think about my company and build our company. And in that, we pivoted our company from centrally to Solzy. And I remember meeting this guy, Jason Friedman. He started a company, 42 Floors, and he was instrumental in, advising me on how to fundraise. And he was like, "What's your growth rate?" And I was like, "I don't know. What do you mean?" He's like, "Startups need to grow. What's your growth rate?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Well, you need to know what your week over week and your month over month growth rate is, and you should be targeting." I don't remember. I think he was like, I don't remember what numbers he said, but he gave me some numbers, and he's like, "That's what you should be thinking about." And I was like, "Okay, cool. That's what we're gonna do."
We'll do
So,
that.
and so I was like, "Guys, we need to grow." So, because it's a weird concept, because when I the companies that started before, I wasn't trying to grow, I was trying to make it profitable and, like, fund my life.
Yeah.
uh Startups, um you're at the time, at least, your key metric was how fast are you grow. And so I sat down with the team. We decided that we were going to grow, and then we started growing. Once you start to focus on something, it's that's saying, when you focus on what you focus on expands. And so, yeah, started focusing on growing. We started growing, and then I used the Penn network. I'm a Penn grad, and I met with Alex Mattal from Funders Club, um, and through that, I was able to raise a seed round. We raised about $1 million, about 9 months after getting Jason's advice, and and then we raised our Series A from First Round Capital, where they invested. We raised a $4 million round, in which First Round and Soft Tech VC both led the round.
Going through that, then raising that round from first round, how did you end up having them as the lead investors in that? Because there's obviously a number of investors, and you had gotten traction. You got some great advice early on about growth, which has obviously changed things for you at Solty. Then getting first round, though, what went into that in terms of them being the ones that were going to help lead this round?
I met Josh Koppelman at the TED conference.
Yeah.
Josh is on the board of Funders Club, and Alex always talked about how incredible Josh was. And he also started half.com, and I started a company in college where I was selling books on half.com. So I was just a big, fan of his work.
Yeah.
And I kept him up to date, kept sending him updates on how the business was going, and they, eventually um, ended up leading the round when we were fundraising. And I pitched probably like 50 VCs for that round, of which, yeah, Josh ended up leading the round.
Yeah, and from having obviously so much fundraising experience at this point now, and I've raised millions of dollars for other founders as well who are going to be wondering about this. You mentioned early on here about you understood the process way more for by the time you got into Wonderschool with starting Wonderschool, you had a much better understanding and grasp of the fundraising process because you had gone through it so many different times. What are some aspects just for other people, some aspects of that fundraising process that would be useful for other founders to know who, whether they've haven't raised before or they've raised a series, raised a seed round and are looking at a series A, just kind of some of the things around the process of fundraising that you think might be helpful for others if you have anything particular.
What I typically tell folks is to pitch a lot of investors. So have a wide, like a big list, 50 investors. Be very comfortable getting no. You only need one yes. You're going to get lots of no's, like lots of no's. So it's like every time I raise, I get lots of no's. And so it's just, you have to sort of be comfortable with a lot of no's. Steve Blank always tells this story about when he was fundraising for his company and how like he was pitching VCs and everyone kept saying no. And he realized as he was driving to another meeting that if he kept saying the same thing, he would keep getting no's. And he was sitting with his VP of sales and he's like, we need to change our pitch. And I always think about that story. It's like, yeah, what you start off with doesn't mean just because you start off with a certain pitch doesn't mean that you need to keep using that exact same pitch in all of your other pitches. So you need to pivot while you're going through the process. And so that's another thing. It's like try one deck and literally after every pitch meeting, make edits to the deck. Keep making edits, and then you're going to land on something that you can tell the same story over and over and over again. Speaking of stories, when you're fundraising, you want to tell a story. It's not like, oh, here's our team slide and here's our traction slide. It's walk the investor through your journey and then take the investor to where you're going. And everyone's journey is different.
Yeah.
And so everyone's deck should be different. You can't like go get a template and then just like fill in some boxes and be like, let's fundraise. And so that's like, and then also for every round, like a series D, a series C, a seed round, a pre-seed round, there's sort of like a culture and an expectation behind that round. And that culture and expectation changes over time. So raising a seed round today is very different than raising a seed round 3 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So you need to know what's the culture and expectation today. And you typically can find that by talking to folks who have raised that round in the past year. And so whenever I'm planning to raise a round, I go and ping folks like, hey, like what's when I was raising for Wonderschool, what are the expectations for a seed round? What do people want to expect? Like, and then you use that information to inform how you tell your story and if it's time to go and fundraise.
I think that's a really important point you bring up, because especially looking at the rounds and how they've changed today. I mean, just in sort of size even. And I've talked to a number of founders on this show who they may have been through, raising rounds years and years ago where they're saying a series A was like a $4 million round or something. And you'll have now, 10, 20 plus $1 million, series A rounds. It's just a lot different. To your point, understanding what the dynamics are, the culture around that at the time you're investing is critically important. And the interesting thing about podcasting is people will hear this for potentially years to come. So it still is important wherever you are, whatever time frame. We're recording this in 2020, but understanding where that's going to be for you then. So going back to Wonderschool, you had this idea for Wonderschool. You get your first teacher and you have your first school. Obviously, you make a lot of progress. You raise a round of funding early on, and then eventually you raise a $20 million Series A led by Andreessen Horowitz in 2018. To your point of kind of the culture on the round and everything there, where were you at in the business at that point when you were kind of raising your Series A in 2018 with Wonderschool?
So we were, well, I probably shouldn't share the details of like where we were in terms of like our metrics.
High level, yeah.
but pretty much, how I was saying, what are the expectations? What's the culture? We were right there. Like we were like after doing all the research I needed to do to figure out if we were ready to raise a Series A, we were perfectly like ready to raise a Series A, and that allowed us to be able to get the meetings we needed to get to raise a round from an incredible investor in Andreessen Horowitz and Jeff Jordan, and be prepared to get past the hurdle of like do they have the metrics today to raise a round.
Yeah.
And that was based off of research. I considered kicking off a Series A fundraising twice before then, and realized that the timing didn't make sense until when we went out to raise.
Yeah, and with that too, with having these amazing investors on board, and even on your actual board as well. I mean, how has that been? Everyone talks about value added from investors. I'm curious as to how you personally, at least, have found that valuable to have. Obviously, the investors you do have that are part of your company at this point. How has that been valuable in terms of having those VCs on board?
Oh, it's been great. Our board's incredibly helpful. So I work really closely with our board on a daily basis, and they all bring different things to the team, and so it's been great working with our board, and what's also great about a number of the firms we work with, they have teams that support them. So like Andreessen Horowitz, Unusual Ventures, First Round, they all have like a team. Imaginable Futures, Marlin, Across Culture, they all have teams that sort of provide different value adds. So like executive recruiting, marketing support, PR support, and so we're able to leverage those teams to help us, build our company.
That's amazing. And I think that seems like a huge part of it. They can actually bring those people on board. And to that point, then you mentioned like the executive recruiting, for instance, but on the hiring note more broadly, and that's especially CEOs. I mean, you're doing sales, you're doing fundraising, and you're hiring, firing as part of it. On the hiring front, I mean, what's been the story for Wonderschool in terms of how that's gone for you, your approach to hiring? I'd be really curious because you've had multiple companies now and obviously have experience with this. What's your approach to hiring been with Wonderschool?
With Wonderschool, I spend a lot of time recruiting, a lot of time hiring. I work with two really great executives, Wayne Morris and Javier Lopez. Wayne's leading our go-to-market team. Javier leads our engineering and product team. And I've been really mindful of finding folks that give me leverage so that I can sort of work on more strategic parts of our business. And then I also spend a lot of time thinking about my strengths and weaknesses, and focus on hiring folks who can complement me and, fill in for my weaknesses so I can focus on my strengths. And then for, other components of the team, we spend a lot of time thinking about what's the exact thing we need right now and for the next 18 months and in the long run, and put together really clear job descriptions and intake forms to really have clarity on the type of person we're looking for. And then once we've done that, we work with recruiters to go and find those people. And our recruiting process and our interview process involves value-based questions. It involves uh, uh, working sessions so that we're able to understand the skills of the person, but also so that the candidate's able to understand what it's like to work with us and work at Wonderschool, and give some visibility into the type of work that they would be doing. So we're very, very, thoughtful, intentional when it comes to hiring.
Yeah, and that part of it is so important for startups, and especially getting it right in the early days. The team that you build from that and expanding from there, because as you grow, is also different skills that you need. To your point, like the next 18 months and beyond, but it evolves as the company grows. And one of the things we haven't really talked about yet on that kind of note as well is just the business model behind Wonderschool. Tell me a little bit more about that. What's the business model behind this, and has it always been the same from the beginning to what it is today?
So it's changed because we've gone from working with programs who are starting out to working with both people who are starting out and people who are already operating. But we have two two products that we have in the market right now, which is uh, a software as a service product where programs are using our technology to manage their program, and that price it's about $150 a month to use that product, and then for enrollments, we work with programs to get enrollments, and we charge 10% for every enrollment, and that's our pricing today.
And with that, I mean, you said it obviously evolved as you kind of changed the business model as well. How did COVID affect you guys at Wonderschool?
Yeah, so in March, I anticipated that there would be a big change for Wonderschool because our primary business model at the time was 10% for every enrollment. And we knew that there were going to be a lot of people who unenrolled from childcare. Um, because if you looked at what was going on in cities all over the country, all over the world, cities were essentially shutting down, rightfully so. And so we were like, this is going to really, change things for Wonderschool. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty. We have no idea how long this is going to last for. And I was sort of operating on the idea that it was like you need to assume the worst. And so far, unfortunately, it's worse than I thought it would be. The fact that we're in November now, and the crisis is just only getting worse. More and more people are dying. We're continuing to have to shelter in place. It's really terrible.
Yeah.
And yeah, for us to adjust, we rolled out our SaaS option to help people operate their programs. And we've just been really mindful about continuing to spend more time with our customers and understand their needs, and invest in building product to help them navigate this. We also have been spending a lot of time with our providers, helping them navigate their finances. So when all of the PPP funding came out, around April and May,
Yep.
we supported a lot of our providers in getting funding. And when we looked at sort of the averages that were coming out from the average provider who would go and get funding, Wonderschool providers were significantly higher in terms of applying and also acquiring funding. And that was just a testament to the work we were doing to support them through these hard times.
And with it, I mean, these are unprecedented in many ways. What's helped you lead your team through COVID? I mean, because as CEO, a co-founder, people are looking to you. They're looking to you for guidance, for leadership, et cetera. What's helped you as a leader kind of get through this so far?
I'd say the thing that's helped me the most is, yeah, the team has been really helpful. Um, so being able to work with my team to navigate these twists and turns, it's been incredibly helpful. Um, I also work with some, incredible mentors and coaches who I've been able to lean on a lot to support me through this.
On that note of coaches, have you always had a coach, or when did that kind of come into play?
I probably got my first coach in like 2016, 2015. So I guess going on like 5 or 6 years of having a coach. And yeah, it's a game changer, super helpful. Another thing I started to do is I started writing a lot based on advice from my coach. And his advice is like, all the answers. You just need to sort of like find them in you. And so I do a lot of writing to sort of try to pull out like what I feel like makes sense, what I feel like the right like path is, um, to help with decision making.
What does that writing look like for you? What's the process for that?
So I use this app called 750 words, 750 words, and it's just like total free form, like stream of consciousness, like just it's I never format it. I just write down all of my thoughts, write down all of my notes. Sometimes it looks like to-do lists. Sometimes it's just, things that I'm thinking about. I'll often go back and look at, sometimes I come up with really good ideas or like a really good plan, and I'll go back and find that plan, and actually like use it, when the time comes.
Is that a daily thing, a weekly thing? Is it just whenever you feel the need to kind of brain dump everything, or is it on like a scheduled basis? I'm just curious.
Well, you're supposed to do it daily, and there's there's like little features that sort of encourage you to do it daily. I do it. I probably do it multiple. I write on it maybe like 5 times a week. Then I get to 750 words maybe like once or twice a week, and 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 I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That's sort of like what I've settled on.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where if it's helping you, then great. Like you find what works for you.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I'm sure they, them as a company, I'm sure they want you to use it daily for only like that reason as well. Like their product, like yeah, you should use this daily, of course.
Of course. Use it all day.
Yeah, exactly. This is a start. You can graduate to 2,000 words. Is our next app?
Exactly.
And on the note of coaching as well, because I've only heard this from a few people on the show, but it tends to be the people who have been farther along in their business, who typically it's been people who have raised a Series A or have really been through companies before. How did you find a coach, and what does that look like just in terms of how frequent you're kind of working with them?
I found a coach through one of my investors. I meet with him weekly, and he also does sort of like exercises with our leadership team. And so he'll lead. We just read the book The Advantage, Patrick Lencioni's book, and there's this process called the 6 questions, and he led like a workshop through like the 6 questions, and then he's led workshops around feedback for us. So, so that's the idea. Works with me, and then he works with the leadership team.
And just to dive like a little bit deeper, because I'm actually really curious about this and coaching and everything. I used to be a personal trainer, and I was really just coaching my clients every day. Yeah, early days of career, has much evolved since. But with that, I mean, what does a session kind of consist of, or even look like from a high level of working with the coaches? I know other entrepreneurs who are listening are going to be curious about this as well. What does that look like?
So it's an hour a week. We check in on like he gives me homework, and you check in on the homework. And then there's things that we're sort of like have goals for the year. So like the thing that I'm really focused on is culture at the company. And so we're constantly checking in on like culture. And that's like the overall theme. And then there's just, like weekly updates and like things to talk about. Sometimes the session's 2 hours, sometimes the session's 20 minutes. But it's like an hour on the calendar. I text him, I email him. I get advice on like how to communicate with different folks in my orbit. And yeah, that's sort of the process.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's helpful as well. And you mentioned the culture side of it. How did you decide that culture was going to be kind of the main focus of this year? Is it just the point of where the business is at now, or take me through that?
I've just gotten feedback that like the culture needs to improve at Wonderschool, and I took that feedback to heart and really wanted to improve it. And so I hired a coach who is incredible at culture. It's frankly, it's like,
well, that does it.
One of my investors was like, you should talk to this coach. He's, world class when it comes to culture. And that's sort of, and it's working. It's helping a lot. The team is thriving right now. And I think a lot of it is based off of the coaching that I'm receiving right now.
Well, to the point that, I mean, I hate to not ask about the culture and how you're going about this with a world-class coach to give other people perspective. What are maybe a few aspects of that, things you've done that have been helpful? I mean, it's a buzzword now, of course, but it's there's a reason for it because it is so important. But
Mm-hmm.
what are some aspects of that have been helpful? You said the culture has improved with Wonderschool. What's maybe some things around that's been helpful?
Well, a lot of it starts with you,
Yeah.
right? And so I really focus on just like being like mentally centered. So I work out a lot more. I have regular meetings. I'm doing this writing exercise. I've been reading a lot of books about culture. So like one of the things I realized that there's this book, I forgot what it's called, but it's something about happiness.
Ooh.
And what the book talks about, I feel like I'm getting like a little woo woo right now, but
No, I love it. I love
let's
it. Let's
go.
go. We're going here.
Let's
We're strapped. We're
go.
strapped in, Chris. Here we go.
Let's go.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Let's go. So I think one of the takeaways I have from the book is that like as a personal trainer, like you don't just like get stronger by like dreaming of getting stronger. Like you have to
Yeah.
work out and you have to train. Like same thing with happiness. You don't just be happy. You don't become happy. You actually have to work to become happy. Which is an interesting idea,
Yeah.
and so I've been doing a lot of work around my own personal happiness. And so one of the things I started doing, I like adventure. I really like adventures. I like traveling, and so I've been traveling. I've actually been on a road trip for the past, what is it, 4 months now. It was supposed to be a week or two, and we're now on 4 months. I was in Honduras. I went to go visit my family. I flew down for a wedding, and I recognize that during COVID, it's a little, precarious to be traveling, but I'm being very careful and being really mindful. But
Yeah.
it's making me really happy, and that happiness is infectious and makes my team happy. It and but the idea of the book, the other cool thing of the book is, uh, people think, oh my god, I'm going to work my whole life and then I'm going to be happy when I retire, or like I'm going to become really successful and become a partner at my law firm and then I'm going to be happy. But it's
Yeah.
actually his argument, it's the other way around. It's that happy people are successful, and so you should try to just be happy today, and it actually will and it will actually lead to you being more successful. So I'm sort of like optimizing for my own personal happiness today. And so that's one of the things, and that to me uh, is influencing the company's culture. Another thing is alignment for the organization, which goes back to the 6 questions. It's really common for a leader, and I'm been guilty of this, of just like coming up with ideas and always like trying to like derail the company and what the company's focusing on. Um, the 6 questions really forces you as a leader and your leadership team to get aligned on what are the goals, what are we here for, what are we, I think some of the questions are, why do we exist, what's most important right now. um, I'm sort of butchering these books. So I'm sort of shooting from the hip, but like but but there's 6 questions that you can ask yourself, and we spent about a month working on it as a leadership team. But now we're all clear on like what we need to solve right now, where we're going, why do we exist, and again, that really helps the whole company do its best work because we can just keep going back to that framework of of what we're working on, and it decreases whiplash, increases focus, increases happiness within the company, which will, ideally lead to, business success, which is what we're all sort of playing for.
Yeah, and I love that you shared that because starting from within, like you as the founder, and then from there at the top of the organization all the way down, then that's how it affects everyone. Because if you are having a shitty day all the time, imagine that it has to go for everyone else around you. It's never
Yeah.
great to be around those types of people, even in the virtual environment we have now. Like, you just don't want to spend time with them. So I think it's really important you brought that up, and it's stemming from having a coach and really wanting to focus on culture also because you're listening to your employees. And there's just a lot of lessons around that for other entrepreneurs, which is why I love doing this show and bringing those nuggets out for people. And one of the last questions I have is just with Wonderschool, bringing it back to the company again, is what is kind of that big vision? You've come a long way already. You've raised a lot of money so far, but I'm sure there's bigger thing you want to do here. What is the big vision for Wonderschool?
So why we exist for Wonderschool, our mission is to ensure every child gets access to high quality early childhood education that helps them realize their full potential. And that is the big idea. And so how can we do that? And so that's what we're constantly asking ourselves as a company and working to execute on.
Chris, where can people go to learn more about Wonderschool and connect with you as well if they want?
Yeah, wonderschool.com. Just go to wonderschool.com. And if you want to reach out to me, just email me at chris@wonderschool.com.
Chris, this has been a lot of fun, very insightful. And I wanted to just say thank you for taking the time to come on the show today.
Yeah, this was really fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Just Go Grind. If you want to follow along on the socials for all things Just Go Grind and with me as well, you can find Just Go Grind on Instagram and Twitter at Just Go Grind. You can find me on Twitter at JustinGordon212. Find me on Instagram, JustinGordon8. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.